Mr. President, thank you very much. I'm rise this afternoon to talk about the horror of Orlando, and I know so many members of the Senate on both sides of the aisle have been thinking about those who lost their lives and talking about this horror that once again has impacted everyone from one end of America to the other. I won't speak for a long time tonight other than to say, which I think is plainly evident from even the evidence that we have right now at this point in the investigation, that this was first an act of terror and it was also an act of hate. And I think both are significant because of the impact they have on our country over time. There's, I think, a strong belief that the first thing that we must do is to express not just condolence, but solidarity with the people of Orlando, the people of Florida, and to do what we can to help them and to help those communities and to help those families who lost so much in such a short time frame, with 50 dead at last count and more than 50 injured. There will be some who say that beyond that there's not much that we can do, that we shouldn't change the laws, that we should just stay where we are now and not change the laws. I don't agree with that, and I won't dwell on a long list tonight, but I hope at some point we can begin to re-engage on a number of issues and at least have a debate, a full debate, and also a series of votes on a couple of measures which I think are common sense. These are ones that we voted on probably most recently in 2013, and I was hoping we would vote on them after that. One is a ban on military-style weapons. I think that would be appropriate to at least debate it and vote on it. I would vote in favor, some would not. Certainly a limit on the size of the clips of the magazines. To put it plainly, how many bullets should one person have in their possession or as part of the weapon at any one time? Should someone be allowed to go into any kind of establishment and start shooting and thereby release rounds and rounds of ammunition, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of bullets? Should that be permitted to anyone at any time, anywhere? I don't think so. Certainly, if someone's on the terror watch list and we've deemed them so dangerous that we have labeled them a terrorist or potential terrorist, and they're on the watch list so they can't get on an airplane, certainly that person should not have a weapon. That seems to make sense. If they're too dangerous to get on the plane because of their tendency to commit acts of violence or to engage in terror, they shouldn't be able to have a firearm as well. I think that would make sense to have a debate and vote on that. Number 4 would be background checks. That was one measure where there was a lot of consensus or substantial bipartisan support, but it didn't pass in 2013. I hope we could have another vote on that. There's no reason why, if you're not willing to, or you're not able, I should say, to get through a background check for a whole variety of reasons, because of a criminal record or otherwise, you have to ask yourself, should someone with a criminal record have access to a firearm? I'll add one more today, Mr. President, because it's new and it's an issue that we haven't talked a lot about, and that's a bill that we just introduced today, the Hate Crimes Prevention Act, and that would be a new proposal to do what some states have done already. I think it's essential to add this to the other pieces of legislation that have been talked about and some that I just itemized. This bill would, first of all, define what a misdemeanor hate crime is, because the intent of the bill is to say if you're convicted of a misdemeanor hate crime, you shouldn't have access to a firearm. This category of misdemeanors would be those under federal, state, or tribal law that are found to be motivated, at least in part, by hate or bias against the victim's race, color, religion, national origin, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, or disability. So in essence, eight of the, what some would call, to use more legal jargon, the protected classes. So that's how we would define a misdemeanor hate crime. So this bill, if upon passage, would keep firearms out of the hands of those convicted of misdemeanor hate crimes. It would prohibit the purchase, possession, or shipment of a firearm by anyone convicted of a misdemeanor hate crime. So that's the basics of the bill. Part of the reason for this, and it doesn't have direct application, obviously, to what happened in Orlando. It might upon further investigation, but part of the reason for this is there's been a rise in not only in hate crimes, but in hate groups across the country. Hundreds more just in the last couple of years, and literally thousands more, if not more, hate crimes committed. So they're among many things we've got to do. I also think, in addition to taking these steps on common sense gun measures, we've got to make sure that law enforcement has the resources it needs to take on the challenge of not just criminal activity, but increasingly almost terroristic activity within our communities. The so-called lone wolf terrorists, the homegrown terrorists, the individual self-radicalized, which it seems to be part of the horror of Orlando. We've got to make sure that if the law enforcement professionals tell us they need more money in the COPS program, we should appropriate more money. If the law enforcement professionals say, please fund that program that's worked for so many years, the Burn Justice Assistance Grants, we need more appropriations, we should make sure that they have those appropriations. If you're tough on law enforcement, that's nice to say, it's better to prove it by how you vote. Finally, of course, we have to continue to focus on what is a major component, of course, of Orlando and San Bernardino and so many other places, and that is violent extremism in communities across the country. We have to make sure that we're working with local law enforcement and federal authorities, not only to give them the resources they need, but to be able to coordinate and do our best to unearth plots before they transpire, and to be able to take this fight directly to a terrorist, many of whom are in our midst here in the United States. So we have a lot to do. It's not simply a question of what we do on a series of common sense gun measures. It's also a question of what we're going to do to help our law enforcement and to work as hard as we can in a bipartisan way to debate and to vote on measures that will keep our country safe and protect our homeland. And unfortunately, what we're seeing more and more is the rise of these individuals who are, as I mentioned before, self-radicalized and sometimes categorized also as lone wolves. We have to make sure that we're doing everything possible to identify them, to apprehend them, and to make sure that we're thwarting these plots ahead of time. It may not work in every instance, but we've got to take every measure possible. Part of that, I think, is doing what I hope we can do as a matter of preventative steps, and that's to say if someone is engaging in hate and taking action against others, even if it only rises to the level of a misdemeanor, they shouldn't have access to a firearm. We want to nip this in the bud, stop it long before that hate continues and develops into the kind of hate that leads to a much greater and more lethal attack on Americans.